What's up, guys? So it's been a little bit since we've had a modern meta breakdown, and there's actually been quite a bit of modern events that have been taking place since Star City has decided that the best way to do a set release now and have the open right after it be a team event. So we've had some modern decks to talk about. Hey, Addie's here with me because it's the House of Cats. So we're going to be talking about some decks. The Pro Tour's this weekend, so I figured I'd get in, talk a little bit about a deck that you could very well potentially see. Even after a piece of this got banned last year. Hey, calm down. People were still playing this deck. Like, especially over in Asia, people were doing well with GPs with this list. Not specifically this list, but this close to this list. So it still is in the meta, still exists. And was the first place modern portion of the team constructed event from the last open there. So also did top 8 classic recently, so definitely something to consider going into it. Did want to let everybody know there will be kind of a full rundown and breakdown of the modern decks that were at the Pro Tour for you guys to kind of get an idea about what the Pro Tour was like when we do our In Response To podcast, which will be coming up next week. So keep your eyes peeled for information about that. So let's talk about the deck. As you guys already know, since you checked the thread and everything and the post from the video, it is all about that Dredge, right? So we're going to be sitting here and doing a rundown. For whatever reason, we're starting on a land. So let's talk a little bit about the deck. What is the deck trying to do? All that kind of good stuff. So, Dredge, okay? The lands that we've got, 20 lands in this list. It's basically green, red, black is the colors, like Jundish, if you will, for the most part. Sometimes you've got ways to make any kind of mana because you might want to cast something else, but for the most part you're going to see like basic mountain. There's our black cleave cliffs, of course. It's our red black fast land, copperline gorge, red green fast land, darkmourn salvage. It's a dredge land. So basically, if you get no dredge creatures into your graveyard, you're going to be able to do something off of this. So it does enter taps for black, but really you're just going to be relying on dredging it. So instead of drawing a card, you instead put exactly 2 cards, since it dredges 2, from the top of your library into your graveyard. You know, whatever the dredge number is, that's what you're going to discard from the top of your library. Gemstone Mine, basically I want to just make any sort of mana, enters the battlefield, 3 mana, or 3 counters on it. You can essentially make 3 mana. After that, it's a useless land for the most part. Of course, our forest, basically just the red-green stuff. So red-green Pain Land, Mana Confluence, make a mana of any color, Pain Land again. So like I talked about with our Darkmoor Salvage here, it's a dredge land. That's the key mechanic for the deck. The kind of objective of it is to discard a bunch of cards from the top of our library, mill ourselves into that. Now, sometimes you're going to have cards in your hand that have this dredge mechanic that we want to get into our graveyard. So how are we doing that, right? What are we able to do? So we've got our 2 main dredge creatures, right? So hopping over to our creatures, right? So Golgari Thug is kind of been our replacement for Golgari Grave Troll once that got banned again, which I'm glad that it did because it was getting things a little scary. Dredge for 6 is, yeah, super powerful for this list. So they said, okay, we can't dredge for 6, we can at least dredge for 4. You know, so when it dies, you can put target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library. Costs 2 mana, so you could cast it out if you want to try to do that. For the most part, you're just going to be relying on that dredge aspect. You know, I'm going to mill the top 4 cards of my library to put this guy into my hand. Then we've also got our Stinkweed Imp, which is our kind of another big one there. Dredge for 5. Those are our 2 big dredge cards that we've got. We've got a couple 2s and 3s and stuff like that, but these are the ones that really matter, right? So it's a 1/2 flying. Pretty sweet, dredge for 5. And then we've got, of course, some other creatures to talk about. But before we get to that, I want to talk about the other accelerators, the main ones here, right? Bam, bam. Our draw, discard spells, right? So Cathartic Reunion is like the huge linchpin that got printed to just like power up this deck a lot more. Pay 2, 1 in red. As an additional cast to cost Cathartic Reunion, discard 2 cards, draw 3 cards. So you can discard those Dredge creature, Stinkweed Imp, Golgari Thug that you have in your hand, draw 3 cards. Well, instead of drawing for each of those 3 instances, you can say, okay, the first draw, I'm actually going to dredge 5 off that Stinkweed Imp and discard 5 cards. All right, and if you happen to hit another Dredge creature, sweet. For that second draw, right, you're going to choose to dredge a 4, right? Let's got a Golgari Thug, cool. And the third draw, well, I got that Darkmoor Salvage, all right? So I'll dredge 2 because I didn't get any other creatures for whatever reason. You just start just filling up your graveyard full of stuff. So that really helps. Same thing for Faithless Looting. Hey, on turn 1, I can sit there, draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards. Just throw those guys in there. Now that is kind of the opposite. You have to draw the cards first and then discard. So you don't get that same power that Cathartic does, but it's still really good. The other kind of 1 drop that we've got in here is our Insolent Neonate. 1/1 with Menace. So, hey, he could be a little bit evasive, a little annoying, but you can also discard a card, sacrifice Insolent Neonate, and draw a card. So it basically says, I'm going to discard this Dredge creature, Golgari Thug, Stinkweed Imp, and then, you know, dredge away that 4 or 5. So on turn 1, you could play this, and then immediately, before you get to take your turn or whatever, say, I'm going to sit there and dredge away a bunch of cards. So it works out really well. So we've got, of course, 3 payout creatures, if you will. Of course, Bloodghast is one of them, right? That's a really good one because whenever you play a land, he can be able to come back from your graveyard. Cannot block, so don't even think about doing that. Has haste if your opponent has 10 or less life. That is actually relevant. Otherwise, you pay 2 black, you pay him, he's a 2/1. Really, you're just hoping for that comeback from your graveyard kind of thing. And you have a way to get lands back to keep playing lands and being able to do that. Our other 2 main payout cards, Prize Amalgam, Narcomoeba. So you're basically relying on these 3 creatures as your way to win the game. And Prize Amalgam, of course, is a 3/3 for 3. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield from my graveyard, so it's like Bloodghast, Narcomoeba, when those guys come back, Prized Amalgam just gets set, basically hangs on to them and comes back from the graveyard with them. Narcomoeba, of course, when it's put into the graveyard from your library, you put it on the battlefield. So off of my Golgari Thug, off my Stinkweed Imp, I've dredged away 4 cards, I've dredged away 5 cards, put those top cards from my library into my graveyard, and now one of them's a Narcomoeba. Sweet, that guy is automatically going to be coming back onto the battlefield. And if I had a Prized Amalgam in my graveyard, that's going to be coming back at the end of the turn too. So Prized Amalgam does enter tap, so there is that kind of delay with him, but still, it's basically you just kind of flood the board, and you have this go-wide strategy of now you have a bunch of creatures out. And hey, if you kill them, I'm not that worried. I can get them back from my graveyard. That's the whole aspect of it, right? Bloodghast is there. Sweet. I'll play a land. Bloodghast comes back. And because he came back, now Prized Amalgam will come back. So you're going to have to exile those, right? Anger of the Gods is really key to help get rid of it. Graveyard Hate, really important for it. So those are our kind of big payout stuff that we've got with the list. Now, there's a couple other spells. You know, Dark Blast is in here as a dredge spell plus removal. -1/-1 until end of turn to a target creature. There are some, of course, 1 toughness stuff. Any of those birds, noble hierarchs, things like that could be running around, just instantly kills those. You know, we've got our Life of the Loam, another dredge spell that's in here, dredge 3, but this also kind of helps fuel to get your Bloodghast back, right? That dredge 3, instead of drawing a card for turn, you put top 3, and you get to return 3 lands from your graveyard, which is nice. So you do have that aspect to it to get those sort of lands back to kind of just keep snowballing the same sort of combo. This list is running Collective Brutality, just a little bit more control-y. You have a little bit more options with you. You can kill off a creature, gain some life, lose some life, make your opponent discard an instant or a sorcery, and it's got that Escalate where you can discard cards. So that's basically just another outlet to dump things to be able to dredge. Then we've got our kind of last payout card here. I'm going to throw this guy back up. Conflagrate, XX, and a red, right? Where Conflagrate deals X damage divided as you choose among any number target creatures or players. Or you can play its flashback, which is even better, which is just double red, and then you discard X cards, right? So you can say, well, the game's gone on long, you've been dealing with a lot of damage with me, I keep dredging stuff, and now I've got a handful of creatures, and I don't want to dump them into the graveyard right now. I'll hold on to them so I can flashback this Conflagrate and just kill you, right? I've done this go wide strategy, and now I just need one thing to finish you. It's this Conflagrate. So you can be able to kind of shoot them in the face. So sideboard stuff that they've got is what you'd kind of expect. Just some removal stuff here. Abrupt Decay, Ancient Grudge, Dark Blast, Destructive Revelry, Lightning Axe is in here, Collective Brutality. We've also got that kind of Disruption, Thoughtseize, Collective Brutality is kind of double duty, Surgical Extraction, Ravenous Trap, which is pretty sweet. Exile all cards from target player's graveyard. If 3 or more cards are put into the graveyard this turn, that you can pay 0 instead of paying 4 for it. That whole trap aspect. Now, the trap's kind of like for the mirror matchup, so it's got 2 in there to help you out, or other graveyard-based strategies. Other thing is Gnaw to Bone. Basically, you get to gain life for each creature card in your graveyard. It costs 3 to flash it back. So pay 3, gain all this life, and you can pay 3 more later on and gain even more life, right? So that's just kind of a nice way to do things. So did want to show that to you guys. There's one other list that is very similar to this that I wanted to highlight real quick, just from the different aspect to it, just slightly. Didn't have the Collective Brutality, actually opted for one other creature there. So we're going to throw that in here, and that is our Haunting Dead. Right? Everything else is pretty much the same. Bloodghast, the Thugs, Insolent Neonate. Narcomoebas, Prized Amalgam, Stinkweed. But this Haunted Dead thing is a pretty sweet addition. Costs 4 normally. When it enters the battlefield, you put a 1/1 white spirit creature token flying onto the battlefield, or you can pay 2, discard 2 cards, and return Haunted Dead from your graveyard to the battlefield tap. So it's basically saying, hey, I can dredge this into my graveyard. I have a little bit more protection against flying attacks, right? If you're trying to just go over top of me, because that is one of the ways to beat this strategy, is you just kind of fly over top of it. Also gives you a little bit of evasion too, saying, well, hey, now I have my own spirit that I can poke up if we're bogged down on the ground here. Neither player can really make profitable attacks, so I'm just going to sit here and get this guy back and just kind of poke you for 1. So a nice little addition there. And this list is also running an additional Dark Blast in the main. You can see the sideboard is also really similar. The other thing that it is running here is that Maelstrom Pulse, a little bit more disruption available to it, but I really like having the Maelstrom Pulse, that kind of flexibility available to it. So overall, the Dredge lists are super powerful, all right, with what they can do. They used to be so much faster when Golgari Grave Troll was around. Now it's a little bit slower, but still, like, they can have some super explosive turns if their deck lines up right and how they mill themselves. So definitely something to, if you're not running any graveyard hate in your board, at least like a Relic of Progenitus, just 1 is enough to kind of help a little bit. If you don't want to run those, make sure you have some ways to exile creatures, because once those Prized Amalgams and stuff are exiled, they're not coming back. If Narcomoeba is not put into the graveyard from the library, that guy cannot come back either. Alright, so if you have a way to answer Prized Amalgam, if you have a way to prevent Narcomoebas from going into their graveyard from their library, returning them to their hands, whatever other strategies you might try to do, that can help kind of mitigate them and slow them down a lot, and really have to change how they approach that match. So again, powerful deck. It is a little complicated to pilot, because there are those lines. Okay, how do I need to set up my first couple of turns to maximize how many cards are going into my graveyard? And really, it's just play reps, do that sort of thing, get your grind on to really get that feeling down of how you want to be able to accelerate out the fastest kind of thing. But again, if you like creature-based strategies that have more strategy than just what's in your hand, what's on the battlefield, it gives you that next level of things, like kind of like how core decks, you have to sit there and be aware of what's on the battlefield, what's in your hand, and what's in your deck. This is, I need to be aware of what's on the battlefield, what's in my hand, and what's in my graveyard. Because you could miss those triggers, right? If you're playing in paper, you could miss those Narcomoebas, those Bloodghast, those Prized Amalgams, and then you're just kind of in a lot of trouble there. So really interesting decks. Recommend you guys playing them if you like this sort of strategy. Great payout for it. definitely something to consider. But again, if you like this deck or want to see other decks discussed for Modern Meta Breakdown, let me know. Leave a comment, all that kind of good stuff. Let me know what your guys' predictions are, decks to see for the Pro Tour. You know, it's going to be some Lantern running around, so be aware of that. That'll be interesting to see. We'll have a whole breakdown, of course, of what decks did actually show up for the Pro Tour coming up next week, so keep your eyes peeled for that. You know, thanks so much for tuning in and watching, guys. If you guys have not had a chance to check it out, Modern Magic Mondays is back with Season 7 now. Season 6 Invitational was great. All the coverage and stuff has been floating around the internet, so you guys can check all that stuff over at Modern Magic Mondays. Of course, I'm the real NanMan. If you guys like it, follow, subscribe, all that kind of good stuff. But that's going to do it for this video here today, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next game.